As part of Ferrari Fridays, William Ross from the Exotic Car Marketplace will be discussing all things Ferrari and interviewing people that live and breathe the Ferrari brand. Topics range from road cars to racing, drivers to owners, as well as auctions, private sales, and trends in the collector market.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Ferrari Marketplace. This is William. I am your host. Now, kind of touching base on some things like I had stated before, kind of noticing downloads and whatnot, what seems to be getting the most. And obviously, it seems to be more about the cars and history than so much about events. I know, like, a lot of you guys, I know a few of you have downloaded, to kind of get the background on events. So I guess it all depends on one's personal interest and tastes and what they want to know and learn, just knowledge-wise. Obviously, I'm gonna still do it because I attend to quite a few events throughout the year, especially Ferrari events. I'm gonna kind of keep bringing those up because I think it's intriguing and it's interesting stuff to people, especially ones that don't have the opportunity to go to these events. There's all these the Ferrari owners clubs all across the United States, so there's a lot of events that these are get put on. And I said, by no means do you have to own a Ferrari to partake and enjoy the brand itself. So like I said, anyone listen to this, even if you don't own a Ferrari, which, majority of us don't, definitely go and partake. These guys are super friendly. They're more than happy to bring someone in and show them around and just even, take for a ride, what have you. So don't be afraid to attend a Ferrari event if you don't have a Ferrari. So, hey, definitely, get out there and attend it and support the brand. But anyways, kind of getting back, and like I've said before in previous ones, you can't hold it against me how, I don't know, I don't want to say bad, but, I'm just getting started and doing these podcasts. So trying to get them more smooth and getting the content correct and how to present it. I'm ironing things out. So you got any suggestions? Hey, shoot me an email, william@theferrarimarketplace.com. Give me any thoughts, ideas for a podcast or episode of car you'd like me to talk about, anything, anything specific you'd like me to talk about, hey, just let me know. I'm all ears. I am all ears. So getting to it, today's episode, we are going to talk about the infamous Luigi Chinetti. As everyone knows that is familiar with this brand, he's basically the man that I guess, if you look at the story, he is the guy that brought Ferrari to America, basically. But what's kind of isn't a little bit known is he kind of, I want to say resurrected, but got Ferrari pointed in the right direction. But he played a huge role in getting Enzo to start building road-going cars to support the racing enterprise. Because as everyone knows, only reason he built those road-going cars was to support his racing, because that's all Enzo was about, was his racing team. So Chinetti played a big role, I get, in convincing him to go forward that. Now, I mean, how much of it true is unknown because the conversation was just between Enzo and Luigi. So, but people in the know seem to confirm this. So it's rather interesting. But let's get started on this. Now, Luigi was born July 17th, 1901. He was it was just north of Milan. I'm not going to attempt to name the town or county or whatever you want to call it because my Italian's terrible, and it's Giago Orago. I know, like I said, don't hold this against me. I do not speak Italian at all, and I can't. My accents are terrible. So, but anyways, his father was a gunsmith, and he apprenticed in his father's workshop, and he earned his lathe operator certificate at age 12. Now, think about that. This day and age, if you had a kid that got in there working and he got a certificate to work a lathe at 12, I mean, you'd have a lot of agencies on you for child abuse. But different times back then. You did what you did to support yourself. School actually wasn't a priority. More it was about supporting the family, earning money. So he got his lathe operator certificate at age 12. Then he qualified as a mechanic at age 14. Now, at age 16 in 1917, he went to work for Alfa Romeo as a mechanic, where he met another guy that was also working there as a mechanic and worked for the racing by the name of Enzo Ferrari. So with things kind of going on, this is the age and era of Benito Mussolini, the fascist party rising up in Italy and kind of taking things over. So things got a little bit sketchy, a bit murky there in Italy. So he packed up his bags and that, and he went to Paris, where he worked for Alfa Romeo as a salesman. So you kind of see he's already kind of at a very young age, kind of getting around and making himself known in the automotive world. Which, in all honesty, back you're only talking the late teens, early 20s, where the automotive industry was still in its infancy. I mean, the first cars hadn't been running for what, not quite 20 years, or just a little over 20 years by that point. So making your way and getting that part is very, very commendable on his part. So while he was obviously working working for Alfa Romeo as a salesman, and he started also, I say moonlighting, but also working as a mechanic for the racing and sports car team and that stuff. He also started driving too, and he's a really good driver. I mean, really good driver. He raced in Le Mans numerous times. From 1932 to 1953, he's won it 3 times. We'll touch base on that a little bit later in this podcast. But driving cars from Alfa Romeo, Talbot, and Ferrari, he was rather successful in his racing career. So you got to give him kudos to that. So, but following the outbreak in World War II, he had the opportunity to come to the United States with Lucy O'Reilly Schnell of Icario Blue team. Again, if I'm pronouncing these wrong, I apologize. Don't hold it against me. But it was for driver Rene Dreyfuss, and it was for the Indy 500 in 1940. So, as timing we have it, this was great because it got him out of Europe right when basically the you-know-what hit the fan. So timing was perfect. So, he went there and did the race, but then he ended up staying there, and he stayed in New York. And he got approval, I guess they work visa, work permit, whatever, not sure back then what they might have called it. But he got a job working at Pratt & Whitney to support the Allied war effort. And then he got, working there. He's, started working on Rolls-Royce engines, and he met a master mechanic by the name of Alfred Momo. Now, during this time, he applied for American citizenship in 1947, and he took his oath of allegiance on March 6th of 1950. And this is kind of a little tidbit note. His naturalization papers was sponsored by Zora Arkus Duntov. As people with Corvette, knowledge, he's the father of the Corvette. So imagine having that. That's your man that supported you and sponsored you in the United States. And that's pretty impressive. So, he was working and everything, supporting wherever, whatnot. So really not, obviously auto racing and everything as a whole was basically put on hold, especially over in Europe. Now, in the United States, it was, was still kind of going on, but not to the extent that it was prior to the war and after the war. Because obviously everything was getting pushed and driven towards, hey, support the war effort, gas rationing, the whole 9 yards. So anyways, when the war finally ended, Chinetti decided, he returned to Europe in late 1949. So first went to Paris to see if his house was still there and trying to see if he still had a place, that was there he could stay at and live. Well, turns out it was gone. So from there, he went down to Modena to meet with Enzo and kind of talk about things. And, during the war and that, Enzo's plan, they got converted, got, nudged to build machine tools. Obviously it was for the war effort. And Enzo was, he was a big racing guy and car guy too prior to the war, but this is what he had to do. So anyways, Chinetti went down. It was Christmas Eve. And he met in Ferrari's office, and obviously this was prior to the other big factory. He still had a smaller one that was in Modena, not over Maranello yet. But anyways, again, this is kind of where things might get a little murky, the second hand, third hand, kind of that thing. But basically, Enzo was, a bit despondent, because, he felt bad because he abandoned building the sports cars and whatnot, and he had to go in this. And so Chinetti says, hey, look, you need to stop making the machine tools, and resume building your racing cars, but you also need to start building road-going cars to support that. He goes, I can sell them in, Paris and France and in the United States. And right then and there, without having, any orders or anything in hand, he placed an order for 25 cars. Talk about ballsy. No orders done. He says, I'll take 25 cars right off the bat and say, now I'll get them sold. So that kind of got the, gas going in Enzo's veins and got him, all right, I can do this, get going. So, but, in June of that year, so 7 months later, roughly, he already began building that new 125 that he was going to go racing with. A V12 engine designed by Colombo himself, that great Colombo V12. And in September 46, it fired up on the test bench. I mean, so basically a year from start to finish to have a car and an own motor, everything like that. I mean, that's pretty impressive. So that's when Enzo, he started outlining all the type of cars he wanted to plan to build and what he wanted to do, and the whole 9 yards, basically setting in place the Ferrari image and the Ferrari legacy. So from there, Chinetti, he was obviously in France, in this meantime, he was still selling some pre-war Alfas and Talbots to American customers and stuff like that. But again, he did not be in the position to make that thing for 25 cars. But anyways, Junior didn't care. So after that too, Chinetti became, Ferrari's, designated importer and seller of Ferraris in France and the United States. Not a bad gig, huh? So anyways, that kind of got him going to there. But I kind of want to talk about, his racing career a little bit. Like I said, he competed in Le Mans from 1932 to 1953. In 53, he didn't drive, though. He was just a sponsor of a car. But like I said, he won this 3 times, and he actually won Le Mans his first time out, driving an Alfa 8C, and he partnered with his co-driver was Raymond Summer, and they won first time out. And so, outstanding achievement. So now also, that following year in the same 8C, he won the Spa 24 Hours with Louis Chiron. So he's partnered up with some very, talented, famous people from back in the day. And, obviously being very successful. Now in 1934, he teamed up with Philippe, I can't pronounce the last name, and Itan Celian to win the second Le Mans 24 Hours in 1934. So he's doing pretty well. Wins it in 32, doesn't get in 33, then in 34, he comes with it. Now, I believe also that year he also won, I think he won Spa. I know he won Spa again. So now he kind of had a lull, obviously because of the war and everything like that. But in 1949, he was back at Le Mans with a Ferrari. And this was the first Ferrari ever to win the 24-hour Le Mans. And it was a Ferrari 16mm. And this is kind of, the folklore and everything, which is great because he had partnered with Baron Selston of Scotland as his co-driver. And as you know, 24 hours. But back then, there really wasn't any time limits like they have now. Right? A certain driver can only drive so much. That's why now teams have 3, 4, 5 drivers. You're only allowed so much time behind the wheel. And back then, it didn't matter. But in 1949, he basically got a 20-minute respite from racing and got behind the wheel. So I don't know how much, how he drove the first leg, how much he drove. I don't know if he drove for 14 hours, 16 hours, 18, whatever, then turn it over to Selson for 20 minutes. And he got back in the car and finished off the last race. So I'm not quite sure exactly how it followed up. I tried to look online to try and figure that out, but I really couldn't find any documentation say, okay, he drove for X amount and Seltz only drove for 20 minutes. But could you imagine that? Driving, he basically drove 24 straight hours. And back then, actually, wasn't, I want to say that unheard of, because I know there's quite a few instances where an individual who raced did the whole 24 hours himself. But can you imagine? I just don't get it. But now, you got to remember, too, back then, though, I mean, you're not talking the speeds they have now, the G-force and everything like that. That was more, it was an actual endurance race where, you had to take care of the car. You had to take care of your brakes. You couldn't beat on this car. You had to be very fluid, very smooth. So you're not talking the neck wrenching and stuff that you got going on and just this, the concentration levels that you have to have this day and age. I mean, obviously back then you had to have those concentration levels, but especially because the course basically only was lit down the front straight and I think a couple of the corners. Other than that, it was pitch dark at nighttime. And how well those guys admit it, but just from memory, whatnot. But I mean, that's just very, very, very impressive. though. Now, like I said, he won Spa actually in 33, and again he won it in 1949 in that same 166 mm for driving Ferrari with John Lucas. So again, he had a lot of success also at Spa. He said he also posted a win in Paris 12 hours in a Ferrari 166 SC. And again, in 1950 with the Tipo 16mm teamed up with Jean Lucas. So again, this guy is very competitive and a very good driver. I mean, in 1951, he was a riding mechanic in the Ferrari 212 that won the grueling Carrera Pan America race. I mean, that's 2,100 miles across 5 days across Mexico. That thing beat the living, out of you driving it. I mean, so look at that. I mean, and I guarantee he drove some of that race, not just right in the passenger riding mechanic. I guarantee he drove some of that too. So, I mean, that's a heck of a racing resume just on that merit alone. So now, getting back to, I guess, after his racing exploits and that, obviously he was getting up there in a little bit of age. So, I guess saying retiring from being behind the wheel, not say if that's what his choice was, but it seems to be, obviously he's getting up there doing it. So, at this point then, he's appointed, the factory agent in the United States, and he opens up his dealership, and he starts, getting clients from all over the country because he's the only Ferrari dealership, and it's over on the in Greenwich, Connecticut. So that's a Ferrari dealership. Got people in California, whatnot, because obviously the convertibles and everything were a big hit back then. But so he started getting tons and tons of interest, in the cars with that. And so he gets his first car he sold was a Tipo 166mm Touring Barchetta, chassis number 0002M. It was sold to a Mr. Tommy Lee in Los Angeles in the first 3 months of 1949. So right there was the first car sold ever here. The first Ferrari ever sold here in the United States was a 166mm Barchetta, chassis number 0002M. So there you go. And the second car that was ever sold to his dealership was another Ferrari Tipo 166 Spider Corsa. Now that one was chassis 016-1. Now, or L, I believe, or I, something like that. I can't read my handwriting. But that was sold to everyone's favorite, and everyone knows who he is, favorite sportsman, Briggs Cunningham. So, and he actually drove that to second place at Watkins Glen's in a race in 1949. So right out of the box, that thing was ready to go. That car is actually in Cunningham's museum currently, so which I would believe is the Revs Institute, because it kind of went to Miles Carlin, Connecticut, and, Cunningham's and whatnot. His third Tipo 166mm Barchetta 0010M sold to a heir to the Kimberly Clark tissue paper fortune, Jim Kimberly. So obviously he had the money at his disposal and be able to purchase the car. Now, he entered it in a few events, but not like, I guess you'd say a huge background racing user, but they actually won an event in 1951, and that was the first Ferrari in the United States to win an event in the United States. So that was rather interesting little tidbit information. So the third Ferrari ever sold, again, the first Ferrari to ever win a race here in the United States. Now, this next person, this next one he sold in 1952, it was a 1951 212 Export Barchetta 0078E. Now, he sold that to everyone's Formula One favorite, Phil Hill. So this is kind of where the relationship and I guess, say Chinetti's relationship with Enzo started, I guess, grooming American drivers to go race for Ferrari. Because not only would it be Phil Hill, you got Dan Gurney, Maston Gregory, quite a few American drivers came up through, as we all know, the ones he created was NART, the North American Racing Team, to get people, into Formula One drives. So anyways, he sold that car to Phil Hill, and, Chinetti would later hire Hill as a driver, and, obviously he recommended him to Enzo himself, and the rest is history. Now, a little background on, Phil's case is Enzo utilized them more in the sports car racing aspect of it, not the open wheel F1 stuff. But due to circumstances, he ended up getting into the F1 car, and we know what happened there. He ended up, winning the F1 championship after the sad death of Von Trips was it Monza? I believe it correctly. It was. If I'm wrong, just let me know. Correct me, but I believe that it was a Monza. It was an Italian one. I believe it was Monza. So Von Trips was killed. So then Phil went on to take the title after that. So obviously, things are going well, and this is where in the early '50s, where Chinetti forms the famous NART racing team, North American Racing Team. He got financial support from George Arentz and Jan de Vroom. They were obviously good customers, and so they were able to help fund his team, which, as we all know, was exceptionally successful, especially in endurance racing at Sebring and Le Mans right up in the 1970s. Now, for F1, Ferrari actually did a few races under the NART banner of racing Ferraris. They were 158s. And they actually painted them blue and white for the races, so it wasn't in their traditional red. That was in the 1964 season. Now, it would... I'm trying to figure out how to word this next part. For some, the FIA, refused to homologate the 250 LM for international sports car racing. So Enzo returned his competition license, vowed to never race in a Ferrari, Ferrari red again. So, a little tiff here. Enzo liked to throw his weight around. So that's why you had the NART colors for the 1964 United States Grand Prix at Watkins Glen, and again at the Mexican Grand Prix of 1964. So in 1965, the dispute was resolved. The cars are painted red once again. So you had that little short period of time where Ferraris weren't racing in red. They were, under the colors of where it was racing. Now there's some, famous ones that were blue that were raced. Also, I believe it was Sterling Moss who raced his. It was a blue one, but that was under a different thing, not NART. But so it kind of just shows, Enzo's, I guess, stubbornness in regards to wanting to get his way. Now, there's the great stories regarding some special cars. Here in America, obviously, convertibles are huge, a very big draw. And, over in Europe, not so much. But I think one of the most famous was the NART Spider that he got commissioned, Ferrari, commissioned them to build. They were supposed to do 25, but only 10 were built. I know a few years ago, one sold for, was it mid 20 million range, 27 million, I think, after all said and done with fees and whatnot. So they're out there, but only 10 were built. One of the famous owners was a Mr. Steve McQueen, but Chinetti had to really convince and twist Enzo's arm to build these cars and prove that there was a market for them. So thank God he did, because it was kind of basically a continuation of the California Spider, which was a gorgeous car itself. But if you ever seen one of those NART Spiders, the 275 NART Spiders in person, those things are absolutely stunning. So kind of moving on. So obviously he's getting up, I guess, say retirement age and whatnot. This is in the mid 70s. In the mid 70s, he commissioned Giovanni Michelotti, if I'm saying that right, to build a series of Ferrari Daytonas, which in essence they were never called Daytonas from the factory. The only reason they got the name there, the 365s, was they had won Daytona that year, the first year that car came out. So they just kind of got pegged and stuck with the Daytona name. So everyone just calls them Daytonas, but it was never officially called a Daytona from the factory. But anyways, that's what they always just go by now. But he partnered with Michelotti to produce some heavily customized 365 race cars, and they were the 365 GTB4 Daytona NART Spiders. So this was shown at the 1974 Turin Auto Show. A second conversion was done on chassis 15965 and was built up as a racing car for an anticipation of an appearance at the 1975 24 Hours Le Mans. Some reason the car was withdrawn before the race, so it never raced. Not sure where that car is at currently. Some of you out there probably know. Shoot me an email. Let me know. William at theFerrariMarketplace.com. I love knowing, want to know the history and stuff where these cars went. So he ordered 3 more of those conversions for road car specifications, and one was gifted to his wife. So I'm not quite sure where the rest of them are at. I know they're floating around there. So like I said, anyone knows kind of on that, let me know. I really kind of like to kind of close the book on that story in regards to where those things went. So anyways, that's pretty much, his story, because I believe after we got done with that, I'm not too sure. I think it was in 1977. He sold the dealership, sold the business, and obviously went into retirement, stayed in Greenwich, enjoyed his life. Obviously, he's a very popular guy, and knew a lot of people. So I'm sure he was an extremely busy man after that, and he ended up passing away on August 17th of 1994 at the age of 93. So you want to talk about living your best life? That guy, did a fantastic job on living his best life. I mean, just all the stories, history. There's a lot of stuff there. In the next episode, I'm actually going to talk about the 1965 Le Mans winning 250 LM that was under the NART Spider banner that went on to win Le Mans. But there's a great story behind that car and the guys driving it and just basically not wanting to be there. So stay tuned for the next podcast, because we're going to talk about that car, because there's a great story and history behind that car, not just the Le Mans race, but everything else about it. But anyways, that's my kind of story here and background on Luigi Chinetti. I apologize. I'm sure I missed a lot. I mean, this is what I could dig up. There's so much stuff out there on the gentleman. I kind of want to just touch on the big things that I felt were important. But he was a fantastic individual. You read the stories and people that were friends with him, whatnot. It's just he was a very gracious, generous man, super nice, and he just had a head for racing and knew how to do it, and he did. So congrats to him. So anyways, that's it. I'm wrapping it up. Again, I really appreciate everybody downloading and listening. And again, be patient with me as I try and get these things worked out. As I get more episodes under my belt, I'll get a little smoother. Hopefully the sound's okay. I'm using this one program, so hopefully everything sounds good. But again, any thoughts, any suggestions, insights, please just shoot me an email, William at theFerrariMarketplace.com. I appreciate it, guys. Till next time, take it easy.
This episode has been brought to you by Grand Touring Motorsports as part of our Motoring Podcast Network. For more episodes like this, tune in each week for more exciting and educational content from organizations like the Exotic Car Marketplace, the Motoring Historian, Break Fix, and many others. If you'd like to support Grand Touring Motorsports and the Motoring Podcast Network, sign up for one of our many sponsorship tiers at www.patreon.com/GT Motorsports. Please note that the content, opinions, and materials presented and expressed in this episode are those of its creator, and this episode has been published with their consent. If you have any inquiries about this program, please contact the creators of this episode via email or social media as mentioned in the episode.